Hi, I'm Sandra Bradford Jennings with Community Partners in Action. March is National Women's History Month, and CPA wants to recognize the many women who have shaped our history as leaders, employees, and participants. That's why I am so happy to be talking today with the Honorable Maureen Price-Boreland, who for over 20 years was the Executive Director for Community Partners in Action, and she is now a Superior Court Judge for the state of Connecticut. Hi, Maureen.
Oh, Sandra.
I hope all is going well.
Well.
Good. So since this is about history, maybe we could chat a little bit about your early days with Community Partners in Action. You joined the agency in 1986, and by 1997, you were named Executive Director. Talk to me about what it was like to be the first woman, first African American, and the first attorney to ever lead this agency in its over 100-year history.
So, it actually gives me the opportunity to start by acknowledging those who were supportive of my elevation in that role. Because I think in many ways at that point, they took a chance on affording someone the opportunity without the prior experience of running an organization, but nonetheless gave consideration to the fact that I had been there for many years and had, I think, grown into a role of managing a lot of the day-to-day functions of the agency. And it is especially of note of Jim Green, who just recently passed, who was a pioneer in the organization and was also instrumental in being supportive in my initial hire and ultimately my elevation to the role of the ED. And also Gordon Bates, who I think I treasure a lot. And even people like Judge Norco, who has subsequently passed. And actually, I keep his robe as a memento in my chambers. His wife was gracious enough to give me his robe and a set of his cat bookends. But nonetheless, it felt like an awesome responsibility. It felt like an opportunity to personally grow and to also participate in the development of an organization that, as you know, has been around since 1875. And it felt like an awesome responsibility in many ways. And so I think what that garnered for me was a commitment of trying to carry on that legacy to the best of my ability through maintaining certain standards around programming, which I think, quite frankly, came from Gordon and Jim and the organization's commitment to the population that it serves, looking at the humanity of who they were and responding accordingly and being sensitive to that. And, then there were the other aspects of being in a highly male-dominated field, as you indicated, and trying to position myself as being a contributing member and to the development of criminal justice, social justice in Connecticut. But couldn't have done it without the support of many, and here we are.
Yep, here we are. So you mentioned being in what was then a primarily male-led criminal justice system. Talk to me a little bit more about what that was like for you early in your career to try to make your mark, and any challenges you may have run into or barriers that you had to overcome.
So, not only was it male dominated, but I think the hierarchy was really to be attended to. And so in the earlier years of the organization, unlike what is done now, the board meetings were held in these other places. So at one point, it used to be regularly held at the Aetna's conference room in Hartford, or in probably one of the more elite law firms. And as you also know, the agency has a history of having had people who were in significant positions, primarily male in the criminal justice field, Jack Bailey individuals, and a lot of judges at the time, because judges were allowed at that point to be seated on the board. You know, on a personal level, I think I just simply made a commitment to work hard, to try to be authentic in the space, to try to build a certain level of respect from those who would see that that was my intent. And, you know, also to, I think, embrace the fact that as an organization, our staff is the greatest resource, and to validate them. And it meant hiring people primarily from the community in which the individuals or the participants came from, and also trying to navigate finding myself in different key areas of decision making, and thus trying to sit on various commissions or committees and build that kind of infrastructure. You know, one of the biggest challenge too was criminal justice can have two sectors. I think there's a public policy side of making change, and then there's the actual community grassroots efforts that's a little bit more boisterous and in your face and demanding. And it's trying to balance those two to ensure that not only were we advocates, but that we would be taken serious when it came to the public policy side of decision making. And it was that daily commitment combined with, quite frankly, primarily a board, which I think the most part was highly supportive and engaged, that afforded me that transition.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and I just want to say your philosophy of always being authentic is something that very much was infused throughout the culture of this organization, and I believe it still is. And I think it's an important aspect of being a part of Community Partners in Action. So, you were executive director for over 21 years. A lot of innovations, new programs, new approaches occurred during your tenure. Share with me maybe one or two particular innovations that you were especially proud of.
Yeah. Our entree into the juvenile field, because as you also know, for years we had been called Connecticut Prison Association. And one of the first things that was done under my leadership was a transition of our name to really expand our reach into the criminal justice system beyond it being about prisons. And part of it was changing the name, somewhat vague in nature, but nonetheless designed to be more positioned to embrace beyond just prison work. And so getting into the field of juvenile justice was really significant for me. The fact that for many years we used to be awfully quiet about what we did because you didn't want to draw attention to the organization. It was like doing your work quietly because public perception at that time was very anti anything beside going to prison, and alternative programs were evolving. People were suspicious of that, thought it was being soft on crime. And so our evolution in partnership with, at the time it used to be alternative sanctions, and I may have misstated what they were called, but now that's Court Support Services Division, CSSD. The partnership with them and DOC helped to really start to build those alternative type programming. The other thing, well, certainly we were on Willis Street at the time and trying to find a site in which the organization could expand. And that was a really tough and difficult many years of hard work, both in terms of political, I think, engagement, not in my backyard. Why should they go anywhere else than, in certain corners? And so the acquisition of the Washington Street property was a huge turning point for the organization, positioning it in a way that afforded us to expand. And sometimes, I still say us because it's like
You'll always be us.
30
okay.
plus years, it's kind of like in the blood, right?
Yeah.
So being able to acquire that property, I thought was a good way to increase the future opportunities for an expansion in programs. And also, candidly, I was driving in, I think either this morning or yesterday, and was reminded that it was 20 years ago that I was involved in a process for having individuals who were on probation being able to vote, and that there's legislation now to seek to expand that, and that was something that was certainly something I was significantly involved in. And I would say, lastly, because it was such a dream of mine, the actual reentry center, and it being like one of the last things that I was able to do with, again, partners, because our name wasn't just a name, it was really how we acted and operated. And with the City of Hartford, the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving, CSSD, Central Connecticut State University, and others, the Reentry Center has been realized. And I am especially pleased that Beth and Deb have taken it and built upon it and is really allowing it to be the success that it is.
Absolutely. And in addition, the success and the model around that center is now going to be replicated in Waterbury, taking the same approach to building partnerships, to doing the planning study like we did here in Hartford, and all of that. And so that is definitely a great example of an innovation here at the agency, and it's a great program.
Good.
Wonderful. So let's fast forward to today. So you were appointed to be a Connecticut Superior Court judge in 2018. How do your years of leading an organization that provides services for people involved in criminal justice shape your work in the court?
Yeah. Every day before I take the bench, I remind myself that this is either somebody's worst day, or they're looking for someone to treat them with a certain level of dignity and to help facilitate decisions that are fair and equitable. And it's like a mantra that I practice in doing that. And so I take that with me on a regular basis. So the humanity that affords, or certainly heightens my attention to, I think is an important part of what I do. From the perspective of, the evolution, with certainly being more attentive to the details of the law, I guess realizing that putting in the time and the effort is what's necessary to do anything. I've certainly done a fair amount of that. I was placed in family court in 2019, late 2019. I think it's a real great fit for my background in many ways, because of that. I think understanding that how someone presents at any minute is not all of who they are,
right.
And therefore, making poor decisions or judgment that may seem to be something that one would be penalized for is worthy of a broader consideration.
Sure.
And so, probably that from a high level, that really is part of what I can really think Governor Malloy recognized and was gracious enough to give me this opportunity.
Absolutely. Can you just share a little bit about the types of cases that come to family court?
So family court is around issues of dissolution, custody, visitation schedule. These are all very personal issues to people that, the distinction, I think, in a criminal arena is you're being judged on something that you've done wrong, and there are guidelines for what kind of punishment should be bestowed on you. I think in family, there is a strong need for understanding the discretionary side of our roles and treating that with the utmost understanding of what it means for people's lives. It is highly charged, highly emotional,
Yeah.
and it nonetheless it is recognizing that our role is to make people feel at the end of it that we've given it some good thought and that it's a fair decision. Usually, for the most part, in the best interest of children when children are involved.
Okay. Okay. So for my last question, I kind of want to talk about the country today. Since last summer, this country has been really looking at how to dismantle systemic racism and unconscious bias, not only within the government, but within the private sector. It's a very emotional topic. What kind of shifts have you seen in the courts related to these topics?
So it probably starts with the fact that the Chief Justice, which I'm, honored to be part of the team. I think in an agency that in an entity that he currently leads, and you certainly know of his commitment in that arena. And combined, quite frankly, whereas I stated earlier, I have a non-traditional background. Normally, people are practicing in law firms or in that entity for a period of time. However, with having been a leader of a nonprofit combined with having been an adjunct at Central in criminal justice for many years, I think the uniqueness of my background is part of what the branch is doing to bring that level of diversity.
Right.
And you've probably also heard in the news that there is a commitment to doing that. So you're seeing those changes, and I think it's meaningful, especially with the population that's primarily served in certain aspects of our criminal justice system. Candidly, I also feel pretty blessed to work with a team of judges where it is an open topic. It's not something that people are shy from having some honest discussions about. And I think that's a significant change from days gone by.
Well, it's eye-opening because there's so many things in this country we just take for granted. And I think a lot of the protests and the killings and things of that sort have really opened people's eyes, and I mean of all races, as to it's time to take another look. Diversity isn't enough. And it's something we're looking at here at Community Partners Action too. We're about to go through our own journey around looking at ourselves through the diversity, equity, inclusion lens, which on surface, if you don't understand that concept, you're like, well, you've got large percentage of people, you're very diverse from the board all the way down to our participants. Why are we looking at ourselves? Because diversity isn't everything. That doesn't mean equity and inclusion, and it's something we're all learning about, and we're going to take a look at and see what happens. Yeah. Well, those are all my questions for today. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Just to probably, I tell people all the time that being a Superior Court judge is certainly a huge honor in my life, but the years that I've spent with CPA were so formative, such a huge treasure, such a learning experience. It was the place where I think I strengthened in what I think the word authentic means and what character means, and also an understanding of people who are really struggling and how important decisions can be in their lives. And so CPA will always be my special place.
Absolutely. And your leadership and imprint are still all over this agency, and that's a good thing. So
And I probably just also want to recognize Beth and what a phenomenal job I think she's doing.
She really is.
What
She
a
really
wonderful
is.
transition. Yeah. And
It's the way it should be. You're supposed to, if you bring in somebody, they should build on what's here. And
yeah.
that's what she's doing. And I think she's doing a phenomenal job. She really is.
Yeah.
Really is. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. And we appreciate you joining me today.
All right. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.